Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business Radio. I am your host, Jess Dewell. And today we're talking about autopilot and processes. They have a lot of correlated meanings, and depending on the situation we find ourselves in, maybe they're the same. Most often they are different because we work in tandem, in conjunction, next to, in spite of people around us every single day. And so let's make the best of that. And oh, by the way, that's one of my favorite songs, and that totally going to take a tangent. In spite of ourselves, that's something that my husband gave to me as a Valentine's Day gift for 99 cents one year from iTunes. And the concept, in spite of ourselves, here's who we are. This is our authentic, true self. And we're going to irritate each other sometimes, and we're going to love each other sometimes. And by the way, this is beyond just me and my husband now. This actually pertains to autopilot and process, that when we are just overall aware of ourselves and others and our place in space and the situations that we find ourselves in, we can find out, do we have habits? Do they Are they good ones or bad ones? And what processes are we using, and how are we working together, and are we achieving the outcomes we want together? So you're in the right place for conversations about current problems and needs that we as business leaders face. Today's conversation is going to be me with the input of you guys out there using hashtag VBB radio during our program. Also, continue that conversation after using the hashtag. Share it with people who can use this information right now. The other thing is, we like your comments, and the hashtag is one way. Another way is to tweet. Just send me a tweet, direct message or otherwise, at Jess_Dewell. The other thing you can do is send an email to radio@reddirection.com. I'm your business advocate, specializing in working with companies that are at critical points of development to balance growth with constraints found in leadership and operations. As the founder of CEO and as the founder and CEO of Red Direction, I bring you over 20 years of advising, consulting, and facilitation experience, both in operational strategy and organizational culture. This is the place where values and purpose intersect. We're going to talk about autopilot and processes right after this.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Dewell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
So it's the way of things, right? I've been thinking about this a lot because we all rely on technology, right? We rely on technology to help us answer our email on the go, to check in with our Instagram, to make sure that we're staying connected and getting the latest pictures of our colleagues, friends and family and vacations. We are in the middle of summer, our own families, vacations, and cousins and uncles and whomever, right? Neighbors, maybe. And it made me think, this concept of technology. We're in a place where uh, we rely on technology a lot. And as business owners, even when we are not a technology company, we may not be building software. We may not be building machinery that runs software, robots, and things like that. We may be insurance companies. We may be real estate brokerages. We may be biotech companies. We may be hospitals, whatever the case may be, wherever we happen to find ourselves. One of the things that we recognize is whether we're building technology, we're also using technology in our processes. And I want to start right there because we rely on technology. It used to just be a phone and a fax line, and then it was printers, right? You got to have your wireless networks or your wired networks to get things from the printer or from the office desk to the printer in another room and create these efficiencies. So I want to pose the idea that even if we make technology and we use code and we're building software as a service, online applications, whatever the case may be, that's one type of technology. The other is the technology that we use to survive in our everyday life. And I'm using the word survive here on purpose because this is a habit of available processes that we choose to use. And we might use them well, and we might not use them well. And it makes me think of this this power of the process. And before I get into that, I just want to finish the previous thought, which is we're all technology companies. Every single one of us out there, if we're providing a service to somebody else, we are using technology in a lot of ways that is not necessarily proprietary to us to deliver the service that we have been engaged to complete and deliver. And I want to think about that because we think about it as a necessary evil. And then when things happen, and this happens to me a lot, Scott can totally attest, Eva can totally attest that my technology is always doing something weird and unexpected. And I know you all have experienced that here or there. Things go on the fritz, they don't work right. And then what happens? Can we still do the things we must do in that time that we have scheduled? And can we do it with ease and an acknowledgement that we're going to adapt and move on? Or is it more of a complete shutdown? I'll tell you what, for me, it's both. For me, it's both. And that's a story for another day. But this power of process, we are talking about, processes that are useful. We create things in our life that we can depend on. And sometimes these processes are actually schedules, right? I'm thinking about the rhythm of a day. We wake up, we have a routine, even if that routine is a lack of a routine, and we get out the door and we go do what we do during the day in some capacity to some pre-thought about time at a time in the past that was thought about that set up our day to day. And then we come home at the end of the day and we do the same thing again tomorrow. So in a sense, that's kind of a process. Those are not the processes we're talking about though, because I consider that more of a rhythm. And to pause for just a second, remembering the rhythm is really important. There are days when we don't have any energy, and that is our rhythm. And if we watch the larger piece, we can find, is it usually every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks, every 2 days? When is it that we have just lost all of our energy? We have low energy. Because when we have low energy, being able to nurture that and fall back on these things called processes and fall back on autopilot to use less of our own inner resources is what helps us get through those times. Okay. And we're talking about process. We're talking about, okay, we have made an agreement to send our child to summer camp since school is out so that we can still go to work and do our work during the day. There's a process for that. We had to work with our neighbors potentially to figure out, hey, which neighbors are going to these same camps? Can we create carpools? This is a process. The concept of a carpool becomes a step in the process of getting the kids to camp so the work can be done by all of the adults. I have to tell you, there are days I want to be at camp. And so I'm thinking about that because the same thing occurs at the end of the day. Okay, what's the carpool situation look like at the end of the day? We are coming together as a group and thinking about things as a group to ensure we're all able to do what we need to do. We're supporting each other and we're lifting ourselves up. I'm using that example first because it's not a continuous process, it's a summer process. Maybe it's even a few week process depending on the camp the length of the camps. The thing for that is though, and let's think about free play. I don't know if you remember Susan Finch, and I'm going to give Susan Finch a super big shout out here because she said, I schedule spontaneous time to be spontaneous. That's what she said. I schedule time to be spontaneous. And when you think of that on the surface, it's like, that's kind of crazy. But at the same point in time, it creates an opportunity for creativity. And it's part of a bigger process because the work that she does, the people that she works with, the people she interacts in other parts of her life outside of the business all know about this time that she is unavailable for. She's only available for this thing, and she's protecting that time. Also kind of a process. But it's kind of funny because we're still not talking about step-by-step processes. And I'll use the Voice of Bold Business as an example, especially with technology issues. We recently, in the fairly recent past, had a time where all of a sudden my internet went out and I was just gone from the conversation. We had not talked about it before. We had not planned an exact process for that. We did, however, plan a whole bunch of other processes. How do we set up each show? What are the steps for that? How do we make sure that the people that are coming on the show, or that Jess, in the case that Jess is on by herself, is prepared and has everything that they need? How do they know where to go? How do they know what to expect? And who is setting that stage? Okay, that's part of a process. And then during the show, there's Eva, who's watching you guys on social media looking for the hashtags VBB radio to incorporate your comments and questions. Another piece is Scott, who is live streaming in two places, on Facebook and on YouTube at the same time for these programs. And there are steps in that. So we have this process of how the Voice of Bold Business Radio is produced, step by step by step. And I have to tell you, that's not autopilot. Okay, autopilot is what we do when we're talking about behavior as a singular person. When we're talking about process, which this is what it is, every single person has their process, their part of that process documented. Here's what Jess does. Here's what Eva does. Here's what Amanda does. Here's what Pam does. Here's what Michelle does. Here's what Scott does. I think I got everybody. And those steps then become interchangeable. It turns out all of a sudden I'm gone. Okay, Scott and Eva know what to do. They know, well, unexpected. However, even now we have a process for this too, but in the grand scheme of things, we did not at the time. Who's going to take over? Who's going to step up? What does that look like? Make it seamless. Because in the end, that's what a process does. It makes it seamless. It takes obstacles that come up, it removes them, and it ensures that, I say removes them, really, it allows us to see them in such a way it's no longer an obstacle because we can adapt to it. It's what we can build in and rely on and not have to think about or reinvent every single time we do it. And this is a process of multiple people coming together, not reinventing the wheel every single time, bringing their knowledge parts, having it documented, talking to each other about how each piece works, so that when something falls out, somebody else and something else can come in to seamlessly move forward. All right. Val is asking us a question, and we're just going to jump right in and include it right here. Can autopilot processes help us get ahead of changes in our business? And if they can, what's the best way to use them? Okay, those are two very different questions. But we were just talking about the power of a process and how people work together, right? So when we have a team coming together, when are our staff meetings? How do we interact with each other? Do we talk to each other just, in the break room? Do we talk to each other as we're going up and down the elevator, walking out to the cars? Do we actually stop by each other's desks and spend time? And those are some personal choices in that process, but those are pretty much indicators of certain things. And I'm going to take the autopilot processes. Those are combined together. And I have them separated out in the title, autopilot and processes. So let's talk about autopilot. Autopilot are habits. So what is our habit? Is our habit when we get scared to surreptitiously back away into our office and turn on Facebook and check in? Is our habit when we are facing some fear and anxiety to take a break and go to a store and buy a cookie? Is our habit when we are facing some anxiety to throw everything up in the air and cause a ruckus? In terms of making a problem bigger than it actually is, or maybe it's making a really big problem more known. I'm going to put both of those out there. And so thinking about our habits and awareness is one piece of that. So when we have a process, this is what I do to accomplish this. So marketing has a goal. Here is the objective, the message that we are working with this quarter to get out and to support events and programs and sales and whatever, product development releases, whatever needs to be happening. Those messages are being created together. Once they're created, they're going into a set of processes. Here's how we communicate with the world. We're using social media this way. We're using PR this way. We're using interviews this way. We are making sure that we're making this information for our sales team this way. And we've got all of that updated. So there are processes then that filter down with these decisions and information that's there. And the cool thing about that is that it's easy to cover when somebody's sick. It's easy to cover when somebody is out, for bereavement or birth or vacation. And so we want to be able to fall back on processes because we are more efficient. And getting ahead of changes in our business is a whole other concept. When we are efficient, that means we have more time. And when we have more time, Val, we can get ahead in our business because we can stop and think. Stop and think. And that's actually the first place I recognize, to go back to autopilot and process, is when my think time that I have set aside every week to do nothing but think is eroded. There's a meeting during that time. There's an unexpected thing that happened. I decide to do something else instead. Maybe it's some client work instead of that think time. When that think time gets eroded by other stuff, I know I'm in a place where those processes are necessary. I also know maybe I'm excited. Maybe I'm a little fearful. Maybe I'm not sure. Maybe I'm processing, and that my autopilot habits are also coming into play, which may or may not serve me. So we've got two pieces there. So this think time in our business, when we have time for think time, and something that I self-prescribe and I recommend to all of our clients at Red Direction and everybody on my team too, where can they find 4 hours, solid 4 hours one time, to do nothing but think? Think about their job. Think about their role. Think about the processes. Think about their dreams for what they're doing. Because when everything is in order and the processes are working efficiently, we have that space. We can look up. We can come up from the day to day, running around, doing the stuff we do, looking up around. Now I'm thinking about meerkats, right? That they're on the lookout for what's next, for what's on the horizon, as can we when they're efficient. So think time is the best way to not only take a look at processes, but also to be able to know that your processes are clear enough, good enough, and getting the results that are necessary and desired, that this think time is abundant. It's a no-brainer. I'm going to do this think time, this time of day for 4 hours once a week. The other piece I want to talk about with that is, these are the clues, right? There are clues in here. And I was alluding to them, the other clues that we have to step back and be an observer about. Am I avoiding, or am I feeling anxious, or am I feeling some sort of fear? And what is it about? So what are my habits about that, so that I know that when those occur, I am in a place where I'm falling into autopilot. And autopilot can be very useful when the habits are positive. And when the habits are not positive, other things can come up. And we're talking, right now, I mentioned routines a little bit. And I'm also mentioning fallback. So whether we're talking about amygdala, am I safe? Am I threatened? Am I safe? Am I threatened? Or whether we're talking about our gut, okay, am I safe or am I threatened? Am I safe or am I threatened? Do I have to act quickly without thinking, right? When that comes to play, we can find out what our habits are like. And if we don't like our habits, we can't change them in the heat of, the house, the space is on fire, or the sky is falling. That's a better one. The sky is falling. We got to get out of the way. So we've got that to think about. Oh my gosh, when we recognize those, we can't think, we can't plan. We're on autopilot, and we may be on a good autopilot path. We may be on a poor autopilot path. So that comes back to awareness. And we'll talk about the 3 levels of awareness a little later. And I'm going to write that down so I don't forget. But our routines matter. I mean, some people thrive in the rhythm of the day. I'm going to have my coffee at 7 a.m. By the way, I drink tea, so that was not an example of me. I'm going to have breakfast by 9:30. I know if I don't eat anything again until 2, I get hangry. And then if I'm not and I leave the office by whatever time I leave the office, and I'm able to put work down for a few hours, and I'm able to go out, go home, do what needs to be done next, with complete presence in that next step. So there's value in having a routine that we can count on, because we can listen to the stimuli around us. And this is really important in a team too, when we're talking about processes. If I showed up to this show and I haven't eaten and I'm kind of on edge and grouchy, Scott and Eva, consciously or unconsciously, recognize when I'm on edge, whether it's for the show or any meeting that we have, and proceed accordingly. I do the same for them. I can tell when anybody on my team is slightly distressed or distracted, and I take that into consideration, not necessarily asking what it's about, working with what's available in the moment, because those processes, the steps that we do what we do, we can always fall back on those because they're agreements that we have made together to do what we need to do together. So a process can be a little bit like a routine. It's the first of the month and these are the things that happen. It's the middle of the month and these are the things that'll happen. So this is on a wider scale, this rhythm of how things go and what processes show up in different stages of rhythms, not only during a month or a quarter, but also during a day. Here's when I work best and I'd like to be part of meetings. Here's when I work poorest and I need a little bit of a break. Maybe some of us out there want to take close our eyes for 5 minutes. I mean, there are so many different things that we can do in that capacity because these routines allow us built-in efficiencies. We don't have to think about the fact whether or not we have dinner to eat at home because we've already done the shopping and the planning for it ahead of time. We don't have to think about the meetings that are coming up tomorrow because we can be focused on the ones for today because everything is known. It's on the calendar and there's time allotted for each of those. Now, I'm not a real big proponent of time management. So if it sounds like that in here, it may come across that way. But in terms of a rhythm, there is some semblance of a time management is we're sticking our stake in the ground here and we're doing these things at these times during the day as a team or as individuals. And it comes into play really when we're dreaming and trying new things, throwing things against the wall to see what sticks, reinventing a product that needs an overhaul, things like that. All right, Anita, hashtag VBB Radio is asking, how do we avoid into falling into an autopilot trap? How do we avoid becoming inert? Ooh, okay. I'm trying to think about this because as an individual, this inertness, this autopilotness. How do I want to answer this? This is a really good question. Autopilot trap. I don't think autopilot is a trap. I don't think autopilot is a trap. I think it's I think depending on what's on autopilot, right? Like you get in the car after work, or you get in the car from the office to go to a client meeting offsite someplace, and you've been there enough, you know the path. All of a sudden, you look up and you're there, and you haven't really thought about it. Your mind has been on other things. Not necessarily the most appropriate autopilot, yet at the same point in time, there's something that's known and there was something else that took precedence. And so when we end up using autopilot, we're not present. And so in a thing like driving or in a thing like a meeting, all of a sudden the meeting's over and where were we? A thing like a meeting or a thing like driving, presence is necessary. And so when we catch ourselves tuning out or recognizing afterwards, this is the first level of awareness, recognizing when something is done that something happened. Holy cow, I got there and I didn't know what was going on. Where did that hour go? Because I don't remember anything that just happened, right? The car driving and the meeting experience. Those types of things, that lack of presence isn't good for the team and it isn't good for ourselves because we're not showing up fully and completely in that moment. And if we're on autopilot there's a lot of personal work and we have to ask ourselves the question, are we willing? Because by the way, if we see it in ourselves, somebody else around us is also seeing it. We can hide a lot of things, but we can't hide everything. And after a while, autopilot shows up and there'll be a conversation. There'll be a conversation that needs to be had. Hey, there's a lot of distraction here. Hey, you haven't been with us in a while. Hey, being called out. And I'm going to call it a daydream. Could be good, could be bad, could be worried, doesn't matter. Called out in this daydream in the middle of this meeting and you don't know what's going on and we get egg on our face, right? So it's that first step of awareness is being diligent to reflect back and notice, oh my gosh, I got here and I don't know how, I don't remember the actual drive here. Oh my gosh, everybody left the room and I'm still sitting here like the meeting is going on. Okay, I was tuned out. And that tune out, I think, is the biggest danger for us in autopilot, because, and I'm going to just come right out and say it, the wrong things are on autopilot. Walking to get another cup of tea down the hall, I'm on the fence about eating lunch and not remembering it. I'm really on the fence about that because being present so our body can do what it needs to do. I think there's an element of necessity in that. So we're not going to use that. But opening a bag of cookies while you're or a bag of chips as part of your lunch. You eat the main part of your lunch. You still got the munchies. You open a bag of chips, and you're eating chips while you answer some email or do a report. And before you know it, the bag of chips is gone, and it was a big bag of chips, right? Those types of things are indicative of other personal development areas. And those are things to be looking at and just to notice. All right, so we're going to go. So we've been talking a lot about the personal side of autopilot because we want to be efficient. I don't mind brushing my teeth while I'm thinking about something else and not remembering that my teeth got brushed as long as, you know, they feel good. Or sometimes it's making dinner, having a great conversation while making dinner. I might not remember the actual making of the dinner, but the conversation was really good. Or the phone call that you have where the client's on the phone and they're talking to you and talking to you, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm thinking about the next thing already, and I've got to do this report. Those are all things that affect us. The things that affect our work output influence the direction that we're taking our company. And it also influences us in the role that we are in within our company. We have a lot of responsibility as as an operations manager or a VP of project development, or an architect, or whatever the case may be, right? We've been given a really big responsibility to deliver on things. And when we are not present, our teams are not functioning. And when our teams are not present, somebody on our team is not present, our entire team is not functioning. So this leads into a question from Ray. Ray is using hashtag VBB radio, and he's saying, when we talk about autopilot, my first thought is setting the course for business. However, I have a feeling that that's different. Okay, I've got to read this again. I have a feeling that those two things are different, and I just don't know how to make a difference. Okay. All right. So now we're going to move into a different piece of this. Ray, I love the question. And the reason I love the question is the course for business is never autopilot, first of all. The course for business is actually a process. Think of the decision-making process. Part of the decision-making process is always gathering data to know what's going on at any point in time. Not gathering all data, gathering the right data at any point in time. Okay, Ray? And so when we're gathering this data at any point in time, if we choose to ignore it, we might be on autopilot. We also could be avoiding or fear, whatever. Our businesses suffer. Our part of the budget responsibility that we own suffers. And so I look at a process, more of a process, this concept of decision making as the process that sets the course for business. And then what happens when we get to go on autopilot is, okay, somebody just had a baby, somebody's wife just had a baby, and so they're taking some time off. They're going to be gone for 3 months. Well, now we have a process for their job that somebody out that we can fill in to the best of our ability in this course of this charting of our business. And so we have the processes of a specific job that fit into this bigger picture. And as leaders, responsibility for budget, responsibility for output, responsibility for the effectiveness of our teams, right? All those things that come into play are actually bigger than our role. We're stewards of something bigger than ourselves. And when we ourselves are on autopilot, not thinking, not present, checking out, doing the very minimum to just get by, we can't do that forever because everything around us suffers. And we're the ones that hold the course. We're the ones that have charted the course. And so habits that we use to employ processes in times when they're good and in times when they're tough are going to be the key pieces, right? This is the second and third level of awareness that we're kind of touching on right here. Is we can totally run on autopilot for a while. We all do it. We all get burnout to some degree, or we all just want a vacation. We all get jaded. We all get elated. We all get super excited about something in a different part of our life that's so exciting that we really forget about our role and our responsibilities to the company that we are a part of every single day. It's life. It's being human. So instead of kind of covering it up or not wanting to admit that there might be burnout or something else is more exciting for a while, why not just own it? Hey, I'm human. My interest is over here right now. And once I can do that, I'm aware. I'm aware and I can come back and go, so even though that's the case, I can still be present here. I can still be present in this moment. I can still be able to gather the data, make the decisions, adapt as needed based off of problems that come up along the way. So I don't know if I answered your question, Ray, but I did want to start with that. And provided you have a follow-up question, let us know. That's a really important piece because we don't really see when we're having an impact. And I think some people think when we are um, when we don't see impact, we're doing something wrong. We might be on autopilot. We might be doing the wrong process. We might not have the skill. And the thing is, we might not be looking high enough. We might be so close to it that we have to step up, step out, stick our head, our gut, and our heart all out and test the waters. Are we really making an impact? Are we looking at the right things? Can we see? What are people talking about? And that's not a fast thing. There's no how-to today to get a change tomorrow. I mean, there's a misnomer about the fact that it takes 21 days or 48 days or 60 days to make a habit because they're all true for somebody. Yet at the same point in time, depending on how tired, depending on how overwhelmed, depending on how stressed out because there are all these big things taking up space in our mind at the same time, depending on how much those weigh on us, it doesn't matter how strong a habit might be or what great habits we built in 21, 30, or 60 days or whatever it is, that for us, we revert back to something more. We revert back to something basic. We revert back to, what do I do when I'm absolutely scared and I don't know what to do next? Or what do I do when I'm so stressed out, I don't see a way out of this stress and I hate being stressed? Those are going to what I would call those deep-rooted autopilot things. We fall back on those. We fall back on what we know and what has worked for us in the past. In the moment, it's probably okay. In the long run, it's not good to always revert to the same autopilot because if we don't get the results we want, or it takes us off course in our role, our job that we're trying to do, our contribution to a client project, making sure things are running on time, making sure things aren't going over budget, all of those things are really necessary and require our presence. Okay, so here we've got a question from Robert. Isn't the sweet spot for autopilot a small company or department? Beyond that, doesn't it become unwieldy? I was just having this conversation yesterday with a colleague of mine named Steve. And he's a fractional CFO and does controller work. And we were having, we got together for happy hour and we actually had a similar conversation. The thing is, things happen at different sized companies that are kind of interesting. And I've seen a lot of different things happen. In small companies, there could be, I've created this and it's done so well for the company. This becomes my identity in the company and you can't take it away from me because then I won't know who I am. We have things like that. And so autopilot becomes stay out of my sandbox, not on purpose, but because of a pride and an awareness and maybe a need for personal fulfillment and being a little scared. And what I think about, that's one piece. Another piece is a small company, maybe let's say 45 employees. All of a sudden, there's going to be some growth, there's some change, there's going to be a structure addition, there's a new project that somebody's going after, and that new project specifically means there has to be a new thing developed by this company of 45. Well, they're going to need somebody with more experience about this new thing or to take over an existing role to free up the time of the person who has the experience to get this thing built and bring them into the company. So we're bringing an outside source into a 40-person company, and they are at a level of operations officer, of VP of HR, maybe the VP of sales, right? And it's an outsider, not in a bad way, because I'm all about new information, but it's an outsider and it makes everybody that's already there, the 40 people that are already there, on edge. And that can happen in a 5-person company. With the addition of the 6th person, it happens at 45. And then when you get up to like this, I don't know, it's like what? It's 120, 150, 175, somewhere in there, it starts to become too hard to have everything in the company be interwoven. Everything in a company can't be collaborative anymore. There must be sectioned off for efficiencies to create different processes and make sure redundancies are in place, because as there's growth, different departments need different things and they specialize more, which creates these silos. And it's not a bad thing to have silos. It is if there's no cross function happening at all. However, if it's done with effort and energy, um, and a good intent, usually the sky bridges, as the silos are going up, there's those sky bridges that you see in Minneapolis or in Des Moines in their skyscrapers for in the wintertime. And maybe there are tunnels underneath when you're in Houston and it's super hot. So they put tunnels under so you don't have to go out in the humidity, right? All I know is there's these connection points are happening across. So yes, there's more specialization, and somebody who might have been very fluid between two departments now is sent more towards one and focused more towards one instead of the other. And if it's not transparent and if it's not talked about, that's where a place where resentment can come in, and autopilot, bad habits of this autopilot, I'm scared and here's how I'm going to react, can show up. So I don't ever think it's unwieldy, Robert. What I think is that always having that high view in my role, I can have the highest view I've been given. Here's how what I'm doing fits into this department. Here's how what my department is doing fits into the company. And now I understand how my skill fits my role and can benefit the ripple effect all the way up. And so we've got to take personal responsibility. I think it's another way to talk about that. All right. This is the voice of Bold Business Radio. You're listening to program 162, Autopilot and Processes. This is actually a really big topic. And one of the things that falls into this is this concept of neuroscience, right? How do we think? How do we respond? And then there's psychology. How are we influenced? And all of the uses of this information that is out there. I was actually reading two things recently. I was reviewing for some other work that I'm doing, and leadership. This is a book called Leadership by Barbara Kellerman. It's a book that I got. It's a whole bunch of essays. And one of the things that came up, let me see if I can find it. It does not look like I put a sticky note here, but I think this applies. We're going to continue the conversation, the answer from Robert here, because to be effective in our position, doesn't matter our position, to be effective in our position, to lead, to accept responsibility, and to be accountable to that responsibility takes an awareness. It takes the ability to be and soak it all in, and at the same time to take action, to recognize maybe I can see obstacles before they arrive. Maybe we can prevent this brewing problem over here. Maybe there is a problem that we can solve by pulling resources from a different area, right? There's that. This concept of being and action happens in business, and it's an interesting place, because when we're stressed, when we're frustrated, that all goes away. And there's another piece that comes up when we're stressed. And it's this concept, I wrote this down earlier, is disinterest or boredom or confusion. Most of the time, there are sometimes things don't change enough and people get bored. They require a lot of stimulation. I'm one of them. Everybody on the Red Direction team can tell you, after a while, something new will always come up. We can always make everything else better. And there's also going to be this new stuff that gets thrown into the mix. Stimulation. That's an important piece. For some people, other people like stability so much that they thrive and they feel good when they know exactly what they're doing and exactly what's expected of them, and they can see and they understand and they're willing to accept exactly where they're at. They do really well. And so, it depends on our personality in that capacity too, of who have we surrounded ourselves with and what are the strengths of everybody on our team, because when we know those things, we can prevent that unwieldiness from happening. But I know sometimes it just gets heavy. right? I've been going through a time like that too. I cannot wait. I will be completely honest. I cannot wait until August and September because um, the Voice of Bold Business is my absolute favorite thing that Red Direction does. We plan for it, we prepare it, we do it. It's my absolute favorite thing. And I'm tired. And it's interesting because my tiredness, my need for a break has nothing to do with the show. It has to do with other parts of my life that used to fulfill and that used to be fulfilled by the energy that the Voice of Bold Business brings, the other parts of the role, even here at Red Direction. And, you know, they're sapped. And for whatever reason, the fulfillment, the excitement is not continuous. There are some gaps there. And so I'm looking forward to a break because I don't know what's wrong yet. And I don't think anything is wrong. I think it's just a place to be. Um, where the being is for me personally, it's like, okay, we've got these things to do by the end of 2018, and I'm exhausted. The only way the only way that I can make sure that we stay on track, that I can have that big vision to be watch the direction, see what's going on, make sure all the right processes are in place, and really depend so much on the entire team to contribute to those processes and show up and have these ideas to move these things forward to get to these goals for 2018. Okay, we have them. Well, we planned this break before I got tired, which was great because how cool is this timing? This timing is wow, I'm tired. I'm really fighting every single day and I can't wait for the day that I take off, the days I take off, the hours I take off, different parts of the week because I need every single one of them to rejuvenate right now. And we all go through that. We all go through periods in that will happen. It doesn't change my love for what I do. It doesn't change my drive to make it happen. It just what's changed is my ability to sustain the energy for so long at such a high level needs a pause. And I'm excited about that. And I'm looking forward to it because, well, there's a lot of things coming. Totally taking a side tangent now. There are a lot of things coming in for the third season of the Voice of Bold Business Radio that's coming up in October. Can't wait. And we take that 6 weeks because Eva and Scott and I, who are doing most of the weekly, the most intense part of the weekly stuff that makes this possible here today, we're going to get together and we're going to be reviewing statistics and reports, and we're going to be talking about the next stages of what we want to do, how we can better serve you, our listening audience. And you know what? I love being on air. I love having people on air. I love providing this information and sharing this and creating this amazing library. It is my favorite thing to do. At the same point in time, there's another piece that I love that, and I should say I like a lot, that hasn't been able to be looked at very much because of the process, because of how quickly things move, because of the constantness of this particular process that we get to be on autopilot sometimes, which by the way is really great. Right. So when we have a cold or we have a doctor's appointment or we have something like that, we can rely on the process to get us to each step along the way. That's the process that helps us. And our autopilot says, oh, awareness level 1, actually it's more awareness level 3. Hey, I'm feeling low. I'm going to have to tell these people that I work with that my part of the process is going to be a little slower, so please help me out because we got to stay on task. We've got this rhythm, what we do every Tuesday and what we do between Wednesday and Monday to make this show happen. And I totally took a side tangent. So I'm going to try and go back to where I was, which is being tired, may or may not be a disinterest. And that's a good thing to look at in terms of our awareness. Wow, I'm tired. What am I tired about? Do I not like this anymore? Is there some sort of stagnation? Is there something toxic in the process? Where is the energy vampire? And another thing is, I'm seeing it. Can I see it in my team? Is there something else going on in my team? Is it affecting sales? Is it affecting is it affecting us staying on task, on schedule? So these are the types of things that when we're tired, usually it could just be us. And I shouldn't say usually, it could be just us, but it could be us and other people. So changing course a little bit and actually taking a break, like the Voice of Bold Business Radio, we're going to take a break. We're not stopping working. Don't get me wrong. We are not taking a vacation the whole time. We're taking a vacation part of the time. The whole time, the whole big piece is to look at this from a different perspective, to flip it around and see what have we missed in the day to day, right? We're coming out of the day to day so we can see more. Do we like the processes we have? Can we change anything to make our lives a little easier and be able to support each other more and fill in even more? Those are the kinds of things that I get really excited about. But it's interesting to think, because people think we're tired, we're exhausted, maybe we're burnt out, that we're disinterested. I do not think they're mutually exclusive. And I'd like for you, the next time you're in that space, or you know somebody, you see somebody on your team that might be in that space, to explore that with them. Because boredom and disinterest may actually just be a result of a lack of communication that's easily fixed. We don't know. But being aware and acting, as far as leaders go, that is, those two things that are happening all of the time are necessary. Okay, here's a question from our Scott. And he's saying, isn't autopilot just another word for cross training? For is there more to it? Interesting. I think processes are cross trained, Scott. And the way that I'm using the word autopilot here is more, and feel free to jump in if you would like, but the way I'm using autopilot here more is our response, our individual people responses, because we can have a process as an organization. And as soon as we put one person into that process, what do we have? We have a person with their emotions and their experiences and their obligations and the other stuff in their life. Okay, so every time we add a person, we're adding probably more than, but I counted 5 for this particular part of the conversation, 5 things for one person. So if we have 5 people, we now have those same 5 things for those 5 people, and it compounds. So our automatic pilot is our personal way to get through when things are tough. And the processes that we have as a team are what allow us to have some cross training to get us from point A to point B, regardless of the case of 5 people with the 5 things, the 25 things that are milling around that process and interacting with our energy level, with our I'm thinking only I can only think of the word nicely, but it's really not nicely. Our niceties. It's more of our oh, how courteous we are. Maybe that's a better way to put it. Do we have control of our attitude? Do we have control of our attitude? And so a process could be a team being on autopilot when somebody is gone for a day or 2 days or a planned period of time, like birth or bereavement, or sick leave, unextended sick leave, for just 3 of the potential many examples. And so when our resources are stretched too thin, when we're being super duper duper lean, we might rely on those processes as autopilot. So if I'm going to kind of backtrack into this, Scott, and when we stay in autopilot too long and we allow the processes that we know to make our business keep the rhythm of going forward gets stretched too thin and we're on autopilot, well, then what happens? I mean, autopilot becomes the norm and growth will stop. It's that rhythm, it pauses. It's just there. Maybe it keeps going, but it quits going forward. Maybe the rhythm stops in general. And if we're on autopilot too long and one of those 2 things are happening, it's a whole lot harder to fix than if we recognize that the whole point of a process is to bring people together with all their things around them to do the best they can. And that maybe individually somebody's on autopilot all the time because of all the other things that are going on in the world. But as a team, when we're stretched too thin and we're on autopilot, I think that's kind of the recipe where we don't know it until it's too late sometimes. And we're like, holy moly, how did we get here? We go back to that level 2 of awareness. We wake up and we're like, oh, we're in the middle of this and we really don't like where we're at, and our growth has stopped and our projects are late and our clients are unhappy. How did this actually happen? We were on autopilot. And those are bigger pictures to follow. Okay, so we got a question from Marilyn. Is it safe to say that autopilot without mindfulness is zoning out? Maybe Marilyn. And then she asks a question. And her question is, what are the essential elements for autopilot? Okay. So when I think of autopilot for me, and I'm going to use a personal experience first, and then I'll use a work experience. When I think of autopilot for me in the personal world, I'm thinking of, okay, there's just not enough time, and the counters are going to be dirty, and the laundry may go unwashed an extra day, and the laundry room may just be filled with clothes, and the toys may not be put away, and I may have books, the 5 or 6 books that I'm reading at a time, strewn all over the place, open to different pages, and I might have to be okay with that. I like chaos to a point. I don't like chaos in the world around me. So when I have to let that go, I recognize that I'm on some sort of an autopilot. And the other part of that autopilot is, okay, I'm on autopilot, so we may order out for dinner for several days or go out to dinner because there's no way anything else is happening right now. Two things that I will go and do on autopilot. Oh, all right. I just have no energy for that. So what can I put on autopilot? Then the other part of that autopilot is the laundry sits for a couple of days. Now I have boatloads more laundry to do. And yes, I have help around my house, but I'm only talking about me right now, right? So yes, I have all this laundry to do, and I can actually find peace in the washing machine and the dryer and the folding and the putting of everything away and making it neat again. To me, that particular part of autopilot is also these moments of peace and maybe even a little zen, if you will, because doing what's right in front of you, the things that we do to stay alive, buy groceries, cook meals, clean our house, make sure that the trash is taken out. Sometimes those little things, doing them without really thinking about them, but the motions of them, that autopilot motion, we can fold laundry without actually recognizing we're folding laundry, and we get done and we feel really good. I relish those autopilot times. Now I'm thinking about business. So if we were to go into business, we're thinking about this concept of autopilot in business. What I have seen, okay, so I'm going to use a real life example from a company that will remain nameless. Um, there were a couple of people that when I was doing a gap analysis for this small company that stood out. One said, okay, I figured out this is the method for how we're going to get to our sales, and this is what each salesperson must do. And no matter what, we're going to stick to that process. And that person in that role who was responsible for the budget and new business had those numbers. And if the numbers weren't met, he broke it down. And yes, this was a he broke it down to how many calls do you make a day, how many follow-ups, how fat, what are the times that you need to stay in touch with these clients so we get their recurring business. And he just checked in, and as long as his people were checking the boxes, he was happy. And when he wasn't making the numbers, he just said, well, this is the way it worked out, and it's just not working right now. Well, he was on autopilot a little too long. He came up with the process, relied on the process without being and seeing the actions and recognizing, hey, we're not seeing this, even though we're doing the right actions. That was air quotes for those of you listening, the right actions, we're not getting the results. And sticking with that without evaluation, I would call an autopilot in business. Another one here that I've seen in business recently is that this person automatically said, okay, so we've got these 5 things that we're promoting, and we just have this way of promoting, and we're not going to promote any other way. And we're going to promote it the same way we did the last 2 times. And when we looked closer at the same way it was done the last 2 times, the outcomes of the promotion were getting smaller each time the promotion was done at a future event. So let's say we had promotion leading up to event number 1 got result A. Promotion leading up to event number 2 got A minus 10. And then promotion to event 3 got A minus 20. So we're seeing a decrease in effectiveness of this particular process. So without making any changes, this person decided to autopilot a process without taking into account the negative change of this event. And now they have a process that they're like, but this is what we've always done, which is fixable, but it's a pretty big deal because we didn't stop to be, and we didn't stop to take stock of what action to take and actually analyzing what was coming in. And so those are some practical examples of two practical examples of autopilot in business. Well, we're doing what we've always done. Well, we're on autopilot. Well, I figured this out, and if it's not working, it's not my fault. Okay, well, or we're going to do it this way because this is what was decided on, and there was no creativity built into the mix. Now, here's the things we don't know about those, and you won't know about these two scenarios in this company is you don't know what their sales have been or what their sales are doing. You don't know what kind of infrastructure they had or were changing to, and you don't know what kind of attitudes the existing leadership had and the attitudes of the other people around them. So we don't know if they were good employees, but the better, in the top half of employees or the bottom half of employees. I'm just using this concept of process, right? This concept of process and how when we have a process, if we only rely on autopilot, we may not get the results we want. And then it's a little too late. We can't come back and fix it. So we have all of these amazing questions that have been answered. And um, I want to stress this concept of routine. Some of us buck, we fight against. We're rebellious in a lot of different ways. I am rebellious against the use of my time. I want to choose how to use my time. And silly me, I really always think my future self is going to love when I schedule calendars out 2 and 3 weeks ahead of time. But my present me is like, what was I thinking 2 weeks ago when I made these meetings? I don't even understand. And so being aware of that particular piece of it, where do we rebel? Is where I'm going with this. Where do we rebel? And where do we kind of have been like, no, autopilot's not, a specific kind of autopilot's not for us, but a process could be really useful. Well, of course, my past self had my current self's best interests in mind, planning these particular meetings. And in fact, when my past self also puts in very specific notes about what's going on and what is needed and what is expected, I'm even more prepared than I would have been had the meeting been a day after I scheduled it instead of 2 weeks after I scheduled it. So there's time for this background stuff that our brains can do and the strengths that we have to come into place. But we all have processes. Some of us run by a calendar. All of us have time commitments that we must keep and agreements that we've made in terms of time. Some of us like to always try new things to the nth degree. Some of us, and whether that's shiny object syndrome or whether that's just the need to be inspired, who knows? But that's kind of this concept of inspiration. How do we build? And this is a question I want to leave you with. How do we build curiosity into our processes? And how do we recognize in ourselves that we're an autopilot, right? This awareness piece. And how do we then decide, is it all right now to be an autopilot? Sometimes the answer is yes, no harm, no foul. Sometimes the answer is no. And before we go, I've mentioned this concept of, I've mentioned this concept of awareness, which you've heard in other shows, and you hear me talk about on a regular basis. And I'm going to recap them very quickly, just because it goes to our question, our personal evaluation of ourselves and of our teams. How do we know? How do we know when? And it comes down to awareness. When we get to the end of something, we're like, I did not like that. That happened again. Or we finish a process, right? We go through a 3-month project and we go, what do we like? What did we not like? And how do we change it for next time? Well, if we say what we like and we don't like, and we don't change anything for next time, are we better? That's just a question that we must ask ourselves. Are we better? So this awareness after the fact, then awareness in the middle. Holy cow. We planned for somebody to be gone and we were all going to be stretched so thin. The thing is, we didn't recognize the actual impact that was going to happen. So we've got to rely on filling in, and we've got to turn on autopilot, which means we have to change our priorities. Can we still achieve these client goals, these development goals, these product release goals, these call goals, these new contracts, whatever the goals are for your organization, and new hires maybe. We have to prioritize. Do we go on to autopilot, or can we be stretched even a little thinner to actually infuse the things that we need? So, and all we can do is try it out. And the third one is finding that point ahead of time. Okay, we're here now. I see My team has been working on this thing for 4 months and everybody's tired. And they're kind of cranky sometimes. Doesn't matter how much I make sure that they're fed and lunch and we check on their families and we had a picnic and we, whatever you guys do to do your things, to just kind of touch base and make sure everything's going well, right? They're tired. And when they're tired, they're probably on autopilot. And being able to see that ahead of time and go, now I can choose to say, we have to do this again back to back. Or I can choose to say, I don't know if that's going to be good for us. What might another option be? And open it up to the team. Because if they are trying to just do what needs to be done and ask to them because they are loyal, they care, they love their jobs, and even though they're tired, they're fulfilled, they're willing then to have that type of a conversation. So we are at the top of the hour. This is Autopilot and Process. We've talked a little neuroscience. We've talked a little psychology. We have talked a lot awareness. And we have talked about this concept of breaking down autopilot and process in relationship to personal and business experiences. You can find all the program notes at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com/p162. That is thevoiceofboldbusiness.com/p for program 162. You can also search the site for Autopilot and Process. Make sure and subscribe to rate this program. We have many listening platforms, and we also want your engagement. We want to hear from you. I want to hear from you. I want you to tell me, what did you like? What did you not like? What could you add to this conversation? Email us, radio@reddirection.com. Tweet me, send me a tweet at Jess_Dewell and #VBB radio. We are ready. We are waiting. We are listening. We want this conversation to continue because it is our continued conversation that defines what it means to be a leader today. So take the time to have ThinkTime to be able to know and recognize and plan for the times when our processes must go on autopilot.
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Dewell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.